Estella Sawyer stepped down from the noon stage with dust on her black traveling skirt, a split glove on one hand, and every face in Mercy Falls staring as if she were a mistake made flesh. The man who had sent for her stood on the boardwalk beside another woman and said, loud enough for the horses to hear, that a bride who came one day late was no bride of his. Estella did not cry. She only held her little carpet bag tighter while the town measured her hunger, her shame, and the empty road behind her. Then quiet Dallas Viverson stepped out of the livery shade, saw the courage nobody else cared to notice, and made a choice that would cost him more than anyone knew. Before we begin, leave your country name below and tell me where this western night is reaching you. Subscribe if stories of rejected brides, protective cowboys, and hard-earned love keep you listening. The stage driver did not help Estella down so much as hurry her off, as if misfortune might rub onto his sleeves. His team stood lathered and twitching in the street, their harness bells giving one last tired jingle, while the dust they had raised drifted over Mercy Falls like a brown veil. It settled on the mercantile windows, on the hitching rails, on the whitewashed church steps, and on the faces of the townspeople who had come out to see the mail-order bride arrive. Only she had arrived one day late. That was enough to make her a spectacle. Estella Sawyer stood with her trunk set beside her and her carpet bag pressed to her ribs. She was 24 years old, though that afternoon made her feel both younger and much older. Younger, because the eyes on her took her back to childhood, to the poorhouse yard where women had looked over orphan girls like goods at a market. Older, because she knew better now than to beg anyone to see her kindly. Her brown hat had lost a ribbon somewhere on the road. One sleeve of her traveling jacket was smudged with mud from the washout near Bitter Creek. The hem of her skirt had dried stiff after she had stood half the night in rain, holding a lantern for the driver while the men levered a wheel out of a rut. Beneath her left glove, 2 knuckles were scraped raw from carrying a feverish child across a flooded ditch so his mother could climb safely after him. None of that was visible to Mercy Falls. All they saw was a mail-order bride who had missed her appointed day. Edwin Vale came out from in front of the hotel with a smile that was not a smile. He was a broad man with a barbered beard, a checked waistcoat, and a gold watch chain displayed as though it were a badge of character. Beside him stood a pale young widow named Lavinia Carter, gloved and powdered, wearing a silk bonnet that had never known a hard road. Edwin tipped his hat to the crowd first, not to Estella. "Well," he said, his voice carrying with practiced ease, "Miss Sawyer, you will understand a man cannot be expected to wait forever." A ripple of laughter went through the boardwalk, not loud, not wicked enough for anyone to feel guilty about later. Just the kind of laughter that tells a lonely person she has no place to set her feet. Estella felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her chin level. "Mr. Vale, the stage was delayed by weather. I sent word with the southbound rider when we stopped at Bitter Creek. No such word reached me." His eyes swept over her dusty clothes. "And yesterday was the day named in the letters. Yesterday was the day Reverend Pike set aside. Yesterday was the day the license was ready." The widow Lavinia lowered her eyes, but she did not step away from him. Edwin laid one hand over hers. "A gentleman must protect his household from uncertainty. Miss Carter and I have come to an understanding." The crowd stirred more openly now. A woman near the mercantile whispered, "Poor thing," in a tone that held no pity at all. A boy sitting on a water trough kicked his heels and stared at Stella's trunk. Someone else murmured that this was what came of ordering wives by post, as though Estella had packed herself in a crate and shipped herself west. Estella looked at Edwin Vale, at the woman beside him, at the town that had already decided her worth. In her carpet bag was the packet of letters he had written, all full of fine talk about a home needing a gentle woman, a man tired of eating alone, a church pew with an empty space beside him. In her bodice, folded small, was the last of the money she possessed. It would not buy passage all the way back east, not even close. I am sorry for the inconvenience, she said. Her voice did not break, and somehow that made the silence sharper. Edwin blinked, perhaps disappointed that she had not pleaded. The hotel has no rooms on credit, he added. I have settled the license fee and the church fee. Your agency, take up the rest with me by post. My agency, Estella said softly, was one woman in St. Joseph with a desk in the back of a dress shop. That drew another murmur. It sounded like a verdict. The stage driver had already begun untying mail sacks. He wanted no part of her. The hotel clerk watched from the doorway with his arms folded. Reverend Pike stood by the church gate, troubled but still. No one moved toward Estella. The whole town seemed content to let her stand in the street until the dust swallowed her. At the far side of the livery, Dallas Iverson watched from the shade. He was not the kind of man people noticed first. He was tall, lean, and sun-browned, with a black hat pulled low and a gray shirt washed thin at the cuffs. His face was quiet in a way that made strangers think him cold. A scar cut pale along his jaw, disappearing into the dark stubble he had not bothered to shave that morning. He had come to town for oats, horseshoe nails, and a sack of flour. He had not come to interfere in another man's cruelty, but he saw what others missed. He saw Estella's scraped knuckles when her glove shifted. He saw the child's small blue ribbon tied around the handle of her carpet bag. He had seen that ribbon earlier too, tied in the hair of little Ruthie Bell, who had been carried from the delayed stage, half asleep and fever-bright. Ruthie's mother had gone straight to the doctor with the girl pressed against her shoulder, weeping thanks toward the dusty bride before the crowd gathered. Dallas saw Estella look once toward the doctor's office, not toward Edwin Vale. He saw relief in her face when the doctor's door closed behind the child. Whatever had delayed that stage, Estella Sawyer had not spent the lost day thinking only of herself. He also saw the way she reached for her trunk. It was too heavy for her, but she meant to lift it because nobody else would. Dallas stepped out of the shade. His boots sounded plain against the hard street. Heads turned. Mercy Falls knew Dallas Iverson. They knew his ranch east of town, his few words, his habit of paying debts early and leaving gatherings before songs began. They knew he had once been nearly engaged to a banker's daughter who had laughed about marrying a man who spoke less than the fence posts. They knew he had not been seen at a social since. They knew, too, that after his sister died, he had taken in her little boy and shut the world out like a winter storm. Miss Sawyer, Dallas said. Estella turned. His voice was low, but it carried because he did not waste it. You have a place to take supper? She swallowed. I do not. Edwin gave a short laugh. Iverson, this affair is no concern of yours. Dallas did not look at him. I asked the lady. Estella's grip tightened on her carpet bag. There was caution in her eyes now, not fear exactly. She had learned the difference between help and a hook hidden inside kindness. I have money for a meal, she said. I expect you do. Dallas bent and lifted her trunk as if it weighed no more than a saddle blanket. My housekeeper left last month to live with her daughter. I've got a nephew who burns coffee and thinks beans are improved by scorching. If you want honest work for a week, there's a room at my ranch, and wages at the end of it. Supper comes with the job. The offer changed the air. It was not charity. It was not proposal. It did not name her shame or ask her to be grateful for being rescued. It gave her something solid to stand on. Estella looked into his face. Dallas did not smile. He did not soften his words with charm. But there was no mockery in him, no hunger, no pity that made itself larger than the person it claimed to serve. A week, she said. A week, he answered. Longer, if both sides agree. Behind them, Edwin scoffed. Taking in strays now, Iverson. Dallas finally looked at him. The town went still. Dallas had eyes the color of storm clouds before rain, and when they settled on a man, that man often remembered some other place he needed to be. No, Dallas said. just recognizing the difference between a stray and a woman who kept her word as best she could. Edwin's jaw tightened. Lavinia looked away. Dallas turned back to Estella. "My wagon's by the feed store." He did not offer his arm in a grand fashion, and he did not touch her. He simply took up the trunk and walked slowly enough for her to keep pace. That small mercy nearly undid her. If he had hurried, she could have hidden in the motion. If he had fussed, she could have hardened herself against it. But he gave her the dignity of walking through town under her own strength. Every eye followed them. Estella felt each stare like a pin through cloth. She passed the mercantile, the hotel, the churchyard, the trough where the boy had stopped kicking his heels. Her mouth was dry. Her stomach had been empty since dawn. But hunger was not the worst of it. Hunger belonged to the body. Shame tried to claim the whole soul. At the wagon, Dallas set her trunk in the back and spread an old canvas over it to keep off dust. A small boy of 8 sat on the wagon seat, thin and solemn, holding a paper sack of peppermint sticks as if it were treasure. "This is Toby," Dallas said. "My sister's boy." Toby looked at Estella with careful brown eyes. "Uncle Dallas said you helped Ruthie Bell." Estella blinked. "I only held a lantern and carried her a little way. She gets the croup bad," Toby said. "Her ma cries when she's scared." Estella nodded. "Most mothers do." Toby considered that. "You can sit up front if you want." It was the first welcome she had received in Mercy Falls. "Thank you," she said. Dallas climbed up after her and took the reins. The wagon rolled out of town with the sun leaning west, leaving behind the stage dust, the whispers, and the man who had decided one lost day was proof a woman was worthless. For a while, no one spoke. The road east of Mercy Falls crossed open grass, broken by sage, cottonwoods, and low ridges where cattle grazed like dark stones scattered by God's hand. The wind smelled of sun-baked earth and distant rain. Estella held her carpetbag on her lap. In the quiet, her strength began to tremble. She kept her hands folded so the men would not see. After a mile, Toby opened his sack and held it out. "Peppermint." Estella looked at him, surprised. Dallas kept his eyes on the team. "He doesn't share those with me." "You bite them," Toby said. "Miss Sawyer looks like she lets them last." A laugh rose in Estella's chest, small and aching. She took one peppermint. "I do." Dallas glanced at her then, just once, and something in his expression shifted. Not much, but enough for Estella to know he had heard the laugh and understood what it had cost. The Iverson ranch sat in a shallow valley, where a creek bent through cottonwoods, and a red barn leaned against the evening light. The house was plain but sturdy, built of squared logs with a stone chimney and a porch, wide enough for 3 chairs. A vegetable patch stood behind a low fence. Chickens scratched near the woodpile. Beyond the barn, horses lifted their heads as the wagon approached. It was not grand, it was not polished, but it was real. Real had become beautiful to Estella. Dallas carried her trunk inside and placed it in a small room off the kitchen. The bed was narrow, the quilt faded, the washstand chipped. A sprig of dried lavender hung from a nail beside the window. Estella touched it with one finger. This was my sister Nora's room when she came to help after Toby was born. Dallas said from the doorway. "Nobody's used it since. Sheets are clean." "I'm sorry for your loss," Estella said. He nodded once. "Kitchen's through there. Pantry's poor but not empty. I can show you the stove." "You needn't show me a stove, Mr. Iverson." "Dallas," he said. "Folks who work under my roof call me Dallas." She lowered her hand from the lavender. "Then I am Estella." He accepted that, and somehow the room seemed less strange. That first supper was plain. Beans, salt pork, biscuits, mixed fast with buttermilk, and coffee. Dallas warned her not to judge him by. Estella cooked while Toby set the table, and Dallas brought water from the pumps. No one asked her about Edwin Vale. No one asked how much money she had left. No one asked whether she had been foolish to trust letters from a man she had never met. When they sat, Dallas waited until she had taken the first biscuit before he took his own. It was such a small thing that it filled her eyes. She turned her face toward the stove until the feeling passed. After supper, Toby showed her where the plates belonged. He was serious about it, as children are serious when their world has known too many losses and they must keep order where they can. Blue cups go high, he said. Uncle Dallas breaks them if they're low. I broke one, Dallas said. Two, Toby corrected. One was cracked. It cracked when you dropped it. Estella smiled into the dishwater. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around her slowly. It did not erase the street in Mercy Falls. Nothing could do that so soon. But it gave her a place to be, while the hurt settled into something she could carry. Later, when Toby had gone to bed, Estella stepped onto the porch. The sky was bright with stars. Back east, she had forgotten there could be so many. Dallas stood near the steps, cleaning a lantern chimney with a rag. I will work hard, she said. I believe you. I am not looking to trap anyone into pity. I know. That answer was too immediate. She studied him. How? Dallas set the lantern chimney aside. Because people hunting pity usually look around to see who's watching. You looked at the doctor's door. Estella's throat tightened. Ruthie's fever came high near Bitter Creek, she said. Her mother had no one. The driver wanted to push on, but the storm had washed the crossing. I stayed with them while the men worked. Ruthie kept asking for her ribbon, so I tied it to my bag after she fell asleep. I meant to give it back. You can tomorrow. J.S. The night insects sang from the grass. Somewhere in the barn, a horse stamped. Dallas looked out toward the dark pasture. Vale should have asked why you were late. He did not want a reason. He wanted permission to choose someone else. Dallas said nothing. Estella looked down at her scraped knuckles. Perhaps he had already chosen her. Perhaps. The simple agreement held no judgment. It let the truth be ugly without making her feel ugly for seeing it. She drew a slow breath. Why did you help me? Dallas folded the rag once, then again. My sister Nora once came home from town crying because a woman at church said a widow with a child ought to be grateful for any corner she was given. Nora told me later it was not the corner that hurt. It was being spoken of like a burden while she stood right there, breathing. Estella turned toward him. He kept his eyes on the pasture. I reckon I remembered. In the days that followed, Estella learned the shapes of the Iverson ranch by labor. Morning began before the sun cleared the ridge. She stirred biscuit dough while the kitchen windows turned pale. Toby fed chickens in boots too large for him. Dallas came in from milking with his sleeves rolled and his hair damp at the temples. He thanked her for coffee as if she had poured silver into his cup, even when the coffee was ordinary and the day promised nothing gentle. Work made a language between them. Estella swept, cooked, mended, washed, and sorted the pantry into sense. She patched Toby's shirts and found ways to stretch flour without making every meal taste poor. She learned that Dallas liked eggs soft, but ate them hard without complaint. She learned that Toby hated onions but would eat them if chopped fine and hidden under gravy. She learned that the yellow mare in the South Corral had a sore left hoof, that the red cow kicked unless spoken to first, and that Dallas trusted silence more than most men trusted speech. On the third morning, rain came steady and cold. A calf went missing near the creek bottom. Dallas found its tracks sliding down a muddy bank where the water had risen. Estella saw him take a rope and start out alone. I am coming, she said, taking her shawl from the peg. You'll ruin those boots. They are already ruined. He looked at her boots, then at the set of her mouth, and handed her the spare slicker without another word. They found the calf caught in brush, shivering, its eyes wild. Dallas eased down the bank with the rope. The mud gave way beneath him once, and Estella's heart jumped so hard she nearly called his name. He steadied himself, looped the calf, and looked up. When I pull, you keep the rope from catching on that root. She did as told. Rain ran from her hat brim and down her neck. Her skirt clung heavy around her legs. Twice the rope burned her palms. The calf bawled. Dallas spoke to it in a voice so low and patient that Estella felt the sound settle in her own chest. "That's it," he murmured. "Come on now. You're not done yet." When they finally got the calf up the bank, Estella was muddy to the knees and laughing from relief. Dallas looked at her as if he had never seen a woman laugh in the rain before. Then he took her hands. It was not romance. Not yet. It was practical. He turned her palms up and frowned at the rope burns. "You should have said it hurt." It hurt after the calf was safe. His tone rested lightly near the reddened skin. The touch was brief, careful, and it changed the rain. Dallas released her first. "There's salve in the kitchen. I can put it on." "I know," but that evening, after supper, he set the small tin beside her plate without comment. Toby watched the two of them with the solemn interest of a child seeing a door open, where there had only been wall. A week passed, then another. No one spoke of Estella leaving. Dallas paid her wages in coins counted plainly on the table. She accepted them just as plainly, though he saw her set most of them aside in a folded handkerchief. The next trip to town, she bought thread, writing paper, and a small sack of sugar. She went to the doctor's office first and returned Ruthie Bell's blue ribbon. Ruthie, recovered now, hugged her around the waist with a child's fierce certainty. That hug was seen. So was Estella stepping out of Dallas Fiverson's wagon. Mercy Falls had not finished with her. The whispers changed shape. At first she had been the unwanted bride. Now she was the unwanted bride, living under a bachelor's roof. Respectable women paused when she entered the mercantile. Men tipped hats with a little too much amusement. Edwin Vale watched her from across the street with narrowed eyes, especially when Dallas walked beside her. Lavinia Carter, now soon to be Mrs. Vale, looked at Estella with something like guilt, but never enough courage to speak. At the counter, Mr. Haskins, the mercantile owner, weighed sugar with unnecessary slowness. "You staying out at Iverson's long, Miss Sawyer?" "As long as there is work, work," he repeated. Dallas came up behind her and set horseshoe nails on the counter. "You got a price for that sugar, Haskins, or just opinions by the pound?" Mr. Haskins flushed. Estella looked down, but not before Dallas saw the corner of her mouth tremble with a hidden smile. "Outside," she said, "you needn't quarrel for me over sugar." "I did not quarrel. You came near enough." He loaded the supplies. Near enough is sometimes the only language fools understand. That afternoon, on the ride home, Estella held the sugar sack in her lap and watched the Prairie roll by. "Do you care what they say?" she asked. Dallas considered. "Less than I should, my bae." "Because you are stronger." "No, because I got tired." She waited. He kept the team steady after Nora died. "Some folks said I ought to send Toby to kin in Kansas. Said a bachelor rancher was no fit guardian. Said a quiet man raises a quiet child, and a quiet child grows strange. I tried explaining once, my bae twice. Then I stopped." "Toby is not strange," Estella said. "No, he is careful." Dallas looked at her then. She thought of Toby lining up cups, checking the stove twice, asking whether doors were latched. Careful children have usually had too much taken from them. Dallas' hand tightened on the reins. Nora's husband died in a wagon accident. Nora took fever the next winter. Toby was 5. He sat beside her bed 3 days because he thought if he watched close enough, he could keep her here. Estella closed her eyes briefly. When she was gone, Dallas said, "He stopped talking for near 2 months. And you?" "I had cattle to feed." The answer was flat, but Estella heard the wound inside it. Dallas the Fiverson had not allowed himself grief because a boy needed breakfast. A herd needed winter hay, and the bank did not pause for sorrow. That night, she made Toby a small molasses cake with the sugar she had bought. She set one slice before him and one before Dallas. "What's this for?" Toby asked. "For getting through Thursday," Estella said. Toby looked at Dallas. "Ice Thursday's special." Dallas looked at Estella. "My bae, it is now." The cake was plain, a little heavy in the middle, but Toby ate as if it were Christmas. Dallas took smaller bites. He watched Estella when he thought she would not notice, and she felt the warmth of it more than the stove. After supper, Toby fell asleep in a chair by the fire, his head tipped sideways, one hand still sticky with molasses. Dallas lifted him with a gentleness that made Estella's chest ache. When he came back from putting the boy to bed, he found her folding the quilt over the chair. "You make this house feel less empty," he said. The words seemed to surprise him. They surprised her too. She held the quilt against her. "I am glad." He stood near the doorway, uncertain now, in a way she had not seen. Dallas could pull a calf from floodwater, face down a cruel man in the street, and ride through weather without complaint. But kindness spoken aloud appeared to frighten him. Estella eased the moment by turning to the lamp. "The wick needs trimming." "Yes," he said. "It does." But after she trimmed it, neither of them moved away quickly. The pressure began with a letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, folded in a government envelope, carried by the same stage that had once delivered Estella into shame. Dallas brought the mail in from town and set 3 pieces on the table: a seed catalog, a notice from the bank, and a letter addressed to Estella in a hand she recognized with dread. Mrs. Abigail Trent, the woman from St. Joseph, who had arranged the bride correspondence, wrote that Edwin Vale had lodged a complaint. He claimed Estella had violated the marriage agreement by failing to arrive on time and had damaged his reputation by attaching herself to another man. He demanded repayment of travel expenses. He said he had advanced, though Estella knew he had advanced none. Worse, Mrs. Trent warned that if Estella could not produce funds or a respectable reference, future placement would be impossible. Future placement. The phrase sat on the page like a cold hand. Dallas read the letter only after Estella offered it. His face did not change, but the quiet in him sharpened. "He's lying," Toby said. He had read over Dallas's elbow before anyone could stop him. "Yes," Estella said, "but lies written down often walk farther than truth spoken softly." Dallas folded the letter. "I'll speak to Vale." "No," he looked at her. Estella stood very straight. "I will not have you fighting my battles like I am some bundle you picked up from the road." "I did not say fight." "You looked it." That almost brought a smile to his mouth. Almost. She softened. "Dallas, you have already done more than anyone had a right to expect. I will write Mrs. Trent and explain. I will ask Mrs. Bell to confirm the delay and Ruthie's illness. Miss S. Bell will. I hope so." But hope was not the same as safety. 2 days later, Mrs. Bell came to the ranch with Ruthie and a basket of eggs. She was a worn, kind woman with nervous hands. She thanked Estella again, then cried because Edwin Vale had visited her husband's freight office and warned that taking sides against him would cost them business. "My husband says we owe you the truth," Mrs. Bell whispered. "But he has 3 wagons on credit through Mr. Vale's accounts. If he ruins us, Ruthie goes hungry." Estella took the woman's hands. "Then you must protect your child." Mrs. Bell wept harder. "I am ashamed." "No," Estella said, though the word hurt. "Shame belongs to the man using a child's bread to purchase silence." Dallas stood in the doorway, hearing every word. After the Bells left, Estella went to the barn and worked until her arms ached. She forked hay, brushed mud from the mare's legs, and scrubbed buckets already clean. Dallas found her there near dusk. "You're angry," he said. Yes. At Mrs. Bell. At the world." He leaned against a stall door. "That's a large target. I have good aim today." He nodded as if that were fair. For a while, the barn held only the sounds of horses breathing and rain ticking lightly on the roof. Estella pressed her forehead against the mare's warm neck. "I was 12 when the matron at the poorhouse told me I had a face folks would forget," she said. She meant it as instruction. "Keep useful, Estella. Keep quiet. Don't expect choosing." So I learned useful. I can cook, sew, read accounts, calm children, tend sick rooms, stretch pennies, and smile when my feet hurt. I thought if I became useful enough, someone might see value. Dallas' voice came rougher than usual. "I see it." She closed her eyes. "That is what frightens me," she whispered. He came closer. stopping with a respectful distance between them. Why? Because when a person finally sees you, losing that sight would be worse than never having it. The mare shifted. Dallas rested a hand on the stall rail. I don't know how to promise things pretty, he said. I did not ask you to. No, but I'm wanting to anyway. Estella turned. He looked as if the words had been dragged from a deep place. I cannot make mercy false kind. I cannot make veil honest. I cannot make your road before this one less hard, but under my roof, you will not be treated like shame. Not by anyone. Not even yourself if I can help it. Her eyes filled then, and this time she could not hide it. Dallas did not touch her. That was his mercy. He let her gather herself without making her gratitude part of the debt. The town pressure rose the following Sunday. Estella had not planned to attend church. She did not fear prayer, but she feared pews filled with people pretending cruelty. Became concerned once it wore Sunday clothes. Toby asked if she would come, because the singing sounded better when she was there. That was how he said he wanted her beside him. So she went. Dallas drove the wagon. Estella wore her clean black dress, a fresh white collar she had sewn by lamplight, and the brown hat with a new ribbon made from a strip of blue cloth Ruthie Bell had given her. It was not fashionable. It was honest. The church quieted when they entered. Reverend Pike hesitated at the pulpit. Mrs. Haskins stared. Edwin Vale sat 3 pews from the front with Lavinia Carter, his hand resting possessively on the back of her seat. He turned when Estella walked in, and his mouth bent in satisfaction. He had wanted her there. That was clear. Dallas guided Toby into the Iverson pew. Estella sat beside the boy. Her hands were steady on her Bible, but the words on the page blurred. The sermon was on the Good Samaritan. Reverend Pike spoke of mercy found on a road, of a wounded stranger, of those who pass by because stopping costs too much. His voice trembled once when his gaze brushed Estella and moved away. After the final hymn, before anyone could leave, Edwin stood. Reverend, he said, a matter troubles the moral standing of this community. Dallas's shoulders went still. Estella felt Toby's hand find her sleeve. Edwin turned to face the congregation. I will not speak harshly of a woman alone, but Mercy Falls must consider what example is being set. Miss Sawyer came west under contract to marry me, failed in her obligation, and now resides with an unmarried man outside town. I have borne insult quietly, but I cannot stand idle while decency is made a joke. The words struck like stones, each smooth from practice. Lavinia looked at the floor. Mrs. Bell began to cry, silently near the back. Ruthie asleep against her lap. Estella rose. She did not know she meant to until she was on her feet. I came one day late, she said, her voice clear, though her heart hammered, because the Bitter Creek crossing washed out and a child was ill. I did not fail from carelessness. Edwin smiled sadly. There is no record of that. No, Estella said, because fear has made the witnesses quiet. A few faces turned toward Mrs. Bell. The woman covered her mouth. Edwin's tone hardened. A convenient answer. Dallas stood then. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. But when Dallas Iverson stood, the church seemed to draw in its breath. You speak of decency, Dallas said. Then speak true. Edwin's face flushed. This is Church Iverson. I know where I am. A murmur passed through the pews. Dallas stepped into the aisle. You wrote letters to Miss Sawyer, asking her to come. You promised marriage. You did not wait one full day when weather delayed her. You took up with Mrs. Carter before knowing whether Miss Sawyer lived, drowned, or lay hurt on the road. Then you lied to St. Joseph for money you never spent. Edwin's eyes flashed. Careful. I am. Reverend Pike gripped the pulpit. Gentlemen, Dallas lifted one hand, not in disrespect, but finality. I'm near done. He turned to the congregation. Miss Sawyer works at my ranch for wages. She has her own room. My nephew sits at our table better fed and less lonely because she is there. My house is cleaner, my stock better tended, and my days kinder. If that offends Mercy Falls, then Mercy Falls has mistaken gossip for virtue. Estella could not breathe. Dallas faced Edwin again. And if any man thinks to call her shame in my hearing, he had best bring proof he has lived with more honor than she has. Silence filled the church, vast and ringing. Then Toby stood on the pew. She made Thursday cake, he said. It was such a small, earnest defense that several women began to weep, not loudly, not dramatically, but something broke open. Mrs. Bell rose next, shaking. It is true, she said. My Ruthie had fever. Miss Sawyer carried her through water and stayed awake all night. We were late because Mercy made us late. Her husband stood beside her. And if Mr. Vale takes our freight business, then he takes it. I should have said so sooner. Edwin looked around and saw the room changing against him. His face darkened. Lavinia Carter rose slowly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Mr. Vale told me Miss Sawyer had written that she changed her mind before arriving. Estella stared at him. Lavinia removed his hand from her arm. I see now he preferred me because my father's storehouse came with me. Edwin hissed her name, but she stepped away. Reverend Pike descended from the pulpit, his Bible in hand. Mr. Vale, you have brought accusation into this sanctuary. You will answer it outside before the town council, not here before God as theater. The congregation began to move, not with gossip now, but with purpose. Estella sat down because her knees had weakened. Toby climbed into her arms without asking. She held him tightly. Dallas looked back at her from the aisle. There was no confession in his face, not yet, but there was a vow he had made publicly before he had ever dared make it privately. Kindness was no longer enough. He had chosen her where everyone could see. That choice cost him by sundown. Edwin Vale held notes on several ranchers, including an old feed debt Dallas had taken after Nora's death. When winter hay ran short, the debt was nearly paid, but nearly did not matter to a vindictive man. On Monday morning, a notice arrived. Full balance due within 10 days, or legal claim would be placed against 12 head of Iverson cattle and the north pasture. Dallas read it at the table and folded it quietly. Estella knew quiet had different temperatures. This one was ice over deep water. How much? She asked. He named a sum that made her stomach sink. I have wages, she said. No, you do not know what I was going to say. Yes, I do, Dallas. No. His voice was not harsh, but it closed the door. Estella stood. You defended me, and now he is punishing you. Do not ask me to sit here making biscuits while your land is threatened. He looked up. That land is not your burden. You made my dignity yours in front of the whole town. That is different. Only because men are allowed to call sacrifice noble when they do it, and foolish when a woman offers. Toby froze with a biscuit halfway to his mouth. Dallas looked at her for a long moment. Then, to Toby, he said, Go check the hens. I already did. Check if they changed their minds. Toby went, though reluctantly. When the door shut, Dallas braced both hands on the table. I want take the little money you have, and I want watch pride dress itself as protection. It isn't pride. Then what is it? His jaw worked. Fear. The word changed the room. Dallas looked away first. Everything I've loved has taught me how fast a house can empty. Nora, Toby's voice. The woman I once thought I'd marry, before she decided silence in a man was a defect she could not live beside. I learned to keep my wants small. Land, cattle, boy fed. That was enough. Then you came one day late and made this place feel like it had been waiting. Estella's anger dissolved into something more dangerous. Hope, Dallas continued, rough and low. If I let your money save my pasture, Vale can say I took you in for gain. If I ask you to stay, folks can say I trapped you when you had nowhere to go. If I ask you to go, I do the very thing he did. I have been trying to find the honorable road, Estella, and every path cuts somebody. She came around the table slowly. "The honorable road," she said, "is the one where we tell the truth and pay what it costs." His eyes met hers. She untied the handkerchief from her pocket and laid her saved wages on the table. Not enough to save the pasture, not even close, but something. "This is not payment for shelter," she said. "This is my stake in the place where I have worked, eaten, prayed, and begun to stand upright again." Dallas looked at the coins as if they hurt him. Before he could refuse, a horse galloped into the yard. Toby shouted. Dallas was out the door first, Estella behind him. Mrs. Bell's husband, Jonah Bell, swung down from his sweating horse with mud up to his knees. "Creek Bridge is going," he said. "Freight wagon tipped near the east bend. Ruthie and my wife were following in the buggy. They're stranded on the far side with water rising." Dallas was already moving toward the bar. The storm that had threatened all morning broke open as they rode out. Dallas took the big bay. Estella came on the yellow mare before he could tell her not to. Toby was left with instructions to stay in the house and fire 3 shots if trouble came. Though his face went pale at the thought, the creek had become a brown, roaring force. The freight wagon lay half-turned near the bend, wheels caught in debris. Across the flooded channel, Mrs. Bell stood with Ruthie on a strip of higher ground. The buggy behind them useless, with one wheel broken. Water cut between them and safety. Dallas dismounted, studying the current. "Rope won't reach from here." "There," Estella shouted over the rain, pointing upstream. "The cottonwood leans across narrow water. Not hold. It might hold long enough." He looked at her, rain running down his face. In that instant there was no man protecting a helpless woman. There were 2 people measuring danger, each trusting the other to be brave. Dallas tied a rope to his saddle horn and then around his waist. Estella held the bay steady while Jonah Bell braced the line. Dallas climbed the leaning cottonwood, crossed hand over hand above the boiling water, and dropped hard onto the far bank. Mrs. Bell sobbed. Ruthie screamed for him. The return was worse. Dallas tied Ruthie to his chest with a shawl. The child clung to him, white-faced. Halfway across, the cottonwood cracked. Estella heard it through rain and water like a rifle shot. "Dallas!" she cried. He lunged for the near branch as the trunk sagged. Jonah pulled the rope. Estella threw her weight beside him. Boots sliding in mud, palms burning open again. The line went taut. Dallas slammed against the bank below them. Ruthie still held high in one arm. Estella dropped to her knees and grabbed the child first. Jonah hauled Dallas up by the rope. For one terrible moment, Dallas lay still, face in mud and rain. Then he coughed. Estella made a sound she would never remember making. He pushed himself up on one elbow. "Ruthie, safe," Estella said, clutching the crying girl. "Mrs. Bell, still across," Jonah answered. Dallas tried to rise. His left leg buckled. Estella looked at the failing tree, the rising water. Mrs. Bell stranded and shaking on the far side. Dallas could not cross again. Jonah was too heavy for the weakened branch. The rope would not carry a man safely. Estella stood. Dallas understood before she spoke. "No, she is smaller than you. I can reach her." "No." Estella handed Ruthie to her father. "Dallas, look at me." He did, and the fear in his face was naked now. "I was unwanted in that street," she said. "I am not unwanted here. Let me act like a woman whose life has value, not one who must be kept safe because she has none." His breath shook. Then he nodded once. Estella crossed with the rope tied at her waist. The cottonwood dipped under her weight. Bark tore at her hands. The creek roared beneath her like a living thing. She did not look down. She looked at Mrs. Bell and the narrow patch of earth disappearing underwater. "I'm coming," Estella called. Mrs. Bell was sobbing too hard to move at first. Estella reached her, gripped her face gently, and spoke as she had spoken to feverish Ruthie. "Listen to me. You are going to hold the rope. You are going to move when I move. Your child is waiting." They came back, inch by inch. Twice Mrs. Bell slipped. Twice Estella fell. The tree cracked again as they neared the bank. Dallas, injured leg dragging, crawled forward and caught Estella's arm just as the trunk gave way behind them. All four of them fell into mud. The cottonwood vanished into the flood. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mrs. Bell began laughing and crying at once, and Jonah Bell wrapped his arms around his wife and child. Dallas held Estella's wrist as if he could still feel the water, trying to take her. "You're bleeding," he said. "So are you. You crossed anyway. So did you." Rain softened around them, not stopping, but gently. Dallas looked at her, with a wonder that stripped away all his careful distance. "I love you," he said. It was not polished. It was not planned. It sounded like truth escaping before fear could lock the door. Estella's heart answered before her caution could. But she only touched his muddy cheek and said, "Then, live long enough to say it properly." He gave a broken laugh, and she knew she would remember that sound all her life. By the next morning, Mercy Falls had heard about the rescue. By noon, it had heard a better version. By evening, it had begun telling the truth. Mrs. Bell told everyone Estella Sawyer had crossed floodwater to save her. Jonah Bell told every freight customer that Edwin Vale had tried to buy his silence. Reverend Pike called a town council meeting. Lavinia Carter brought 3 letters Edwin had written to her before Estella's arrival date, proving he had courted both women at once. Mr. Haskins, fearing the shift in public wind, but perhaps touched somewhere beneath his ledgers, admitted Edwin had asked whether a delayed bride's complaint could be turned into a debt. Edwin Vale tried to leave town 2 days later. Dallas, limping but upright, met him in front of the bank with the sheriff, Reverend Pike, and half of Mercy Falls watching. Estella stood beside Dallas, not behind him, not hidden in the wagon. Beside him, her hands were bandaged. Her brown hat sat straight, the blue ribbon washed clean and tied anew. Toby stood on Dallas's other side, holding a folded paper with great importance. The sheriff read the statements. Edwin blustered, threatened, and appealed to decency until decency itself seemed embarrassed by the association. The bank withdrew the demand on Dallas's debt after Lavinia's father purchased the note and marked it paid, not as charity, but as restitution for the harm his would-have-been son-in-law had caused. Dallas refused at first. Estella touched his sleeve. "The honorable road, remember." He looked at her. Then he looked at Lavinia's father, who stood with his hat in both hands, ashamed but steady. Dallas accepted. Edwin was ordered to repay what he had falsely claimed, settle his debts, and leave Mercy Falls under warning that fraud charges would follow him if he did not. He looked once at Estella with hatred, but it found no place to land. She was not the woman alone in the dust anymore. Perhaps she never had been. Perhaps the dust had only hidden what was there. When Edwin climbed into the outbound stage, no one waved. Afterward, the town lingered in that awkward way people do when they have been wrong, and hoped time will apologize for them. Mrs. Haskins approached first. Her cheeks were red. "Miss Sawyer, the ladies' sewing circle meets Thursday. We make quilts for families needing winter help. We could use hands as capable as yours." Estella heard what was not quite apology, but might become one with practice. "Thursday is cake day," Toby said before she could answer. Mrs. Haskins blinked. "Cake day?" Estella looked down at Toby, then at Dallas. "Perhaps sewing in the afternoon." Mrs. Haskins nodded quickly. "Afternoon, then." Reverend Pike came next. "I failed you in the street when you arrived," he said. The honesty of it hushed her. "I should have spoken," he continued. "I am sorry." Estella thought of the girl she had been, waiting for someone to say one kind word before the world taught her not to expect it. She thought of how easy bitterness would be, and how heavy. "Then speak sooner for the next woman," she said. "I will." Lavinia Carter approached last. She had broken her engagement and, by doing so, broken the neat future her father had arranged. Her face was pale, but her back was straight. "I envied you," Lavinia said quietly. "That sounds foolish now, but Edwin spoke of you as if you had been desperate for him." and I thought being chosen over someone else meant I had value. Estella understood too well to despise her. Being chosen by a small man can make a woman feel smaller, Estella said. You are free of him. Lavinia's eyes filled. As so are you. Estella smiled faintly. Yes, I believe I am. The days that followed did not turn life into a storybook. The ranch still needed mending. Dallas's leg, bruised deep purple, and made him cross when he could not work as hard as he wished. Estella's palms healed slowly. Toby caught a cold from standing in rain after being told to stay indoors and denied that he had done any such thing. The north fence fell in a windstorm. The bees still burned if no one watched them, but something had changed. In town, people greeted Estella by name. Ruthie Bell ran to her whenever she saw her. Mrs. Haskins asked for her biscuit receipt and pretended not to be disappointed when Estella said the secret was cold hands and hot oven. Reverend Pike preached the next Sunday on truth without courage, being no truth at all, and Dallas began learning how to speak before silence stole the chance. He did not become talkative. That would have made him someone else. But he told Estella small things as they worked side by side. He told her where the best wild plums grew in August. He told her Nora used to sing badly, but with conviction. He told her Toby had laughed for the first time after his mother's death when a goat ate Dallas' hat. He told her he had kept the lavender in her room because throwing it away felt like losing Nora twice. Estella told him things too. She told him how the poorhouse smelled of lye soap and cabbage. She told him she once hid a book of poems under a loose floorboard because the matron said pretty words made girls dissatisfied with useful lives. She told him she had answered Edwin's letters not because they were grand, but because he had used the word home. Dallas listened to that one for a long time. Then he said he had no right to use a word he didn't mean. No, Estella agreed. He did not. It was late autumn when Dallas asked her to ride with him to the ridge above the creek. The cottonwood that had fallen in the flood lay downstream now, caught in a bend, its roots exposed and washed clean. New grass had already begun to show along the bank, where the water had torn the earth raw. Dallas dismounted stiffly and helped Estella down. Though her hands were healed, and she did not need help, she accepted because his hand was warm, and because needing was no longer the only reason to receive. They stood looking over the valley. The Iverson house sat below with smoke rising from the chimney. Toby was in the yard teaching Ruthie Bell how to throw feed to chickens without being chased and failing. Mrs. Bell's laugh carried faintly up through the clear air. Dallas removed his hat. Estella's heart began to pound. I have been thinking, he said. That sounds serious. It is. She turned toward him fully. He held his hat in both hands, looking more nervous than he had, facing floodwater. You came to Mercy Falls one day, late for a life that would have made you smaller. I have thanked God more than once for that washed-out crossing, though I'm sorry for what it cost you. Estella's eyes stung. Dallas continued, I cannot offer you ease. You know the ranch. It argues with weather, cattle, fences, debt, and my cooking when you are not there to prevent it. I cannot promise the town will always be wise. I cannot promise I will always find words fast enough. I know, she whispered, but I can promise this. You will never be a burden in my house. You will never be spoken of as shame by me. Your courage will be honored. Your work will be respected. Your laughter will be welcome. And if you choose to leave, I will hitch the wagon myself and see you safe. But if you choose to stay, Estella Sawyer, I would spend my life being grateful that you arrived right on time. Tears slipped down her face. At last, the words she had held back since the creek came free. I love you, Dallas Iverson. His breath left him like a man set down after carrying too much for too long. She smiled through tears. That was my proper answer. He laughed softly and reached for her hand. Then, I have a question to go with it. Yes, I haven't asked. Yes, his smile came then, slow and rare and beautiful. because it belonged only to truth. "Marry me." "Yes," she said again, and stepped into his arms. He held her carefully at first, as if she were something both strong and precious. Then she held him back with all the strength Hard Rose had given her, and he seemed to understand. She did not need to be held like a broken thing. She needed to be held like someone chosen. They married 3 weeks later in the same church where Edwin Vale had tried to shame her. This time, the pews were full for a different reason. Mrs. Bell placed Ruthie's blue ribbon in Estella's bouquet. Lavinia Carter stood beside her, not as a rival, but as a friend beginning again. Toby carried the rings and checked his pocket 6 times before reaching the altar. Dallas wore a black coat brushed clean, his scar visible, his eyes fixed on Estella, as though the rest of the world had kindly disappeared. When Reverend Pike asked who gave the bride, the church fell quiet. Estella had no father there, no brother, no family from the east. For one breath, the old emptiness opened its door. Then Toby stepped forward. "She gives herself," he said, clear as a bell. "But we're glad to receive her." A sound moved through the church, half sob and half smile. Reverend Pike's eyes shone. "That will do fine." Dallas took Estella's hand in front of everyone, not hidden, not careful, not waiting for permission from people who had once mistaken dust for disgrace. His thumb brushed the new gold band on her finger after the vows were spoken. Estella looked down at their joined hands and remembered the street on the day she arrived. The staring townspeople, the man who rejected her, the trunk no one would lift, the shame that had tried to name her. Then she looked at Dallas. "You were right," she whispered. "About what?" "I was right on time." His eyes warmed. "I knew it the moment you stepped out of the dust." Outside, Mercy Falls waited with rice, cheers, and a wagon decorated by Toby with crooked ribbons and one sign painted in uneven letters. "Home is this way." Dallas helped Estella onto the wagon seat, then climbed beside her. For a moment, before he took the reins, he lifted her hand and held it where the whole town could see. No one laughed. No one whispered. And if they stared, it was because a woman once measured by her rejection now sat honored beside the man who had seen her value first. The wagon rolled east toward the Iverson Ranch. The sun lowered gold across the prairie. Toby rode in the back among quilts and baskets, waving at Ruthie until she ran after the wagon and had to be caught by her laughing mother. The church bell rang behind them, not as a warning, but as a blessing. At home, supper waited on the stove, kept warm by Mrs. Bell. The porch lantern had been lit. The lavender from Nora's room hung now in the kitchen window, where its scent could belong to everyone. Dallas stopped the wagon before the steps and looked at Estella as if asking one last time whether this was truly the life she chose. She answered by placing her hand in his. Together, they walked up the porch in the amber light. Inside, Toby had set 3 plates at the table, then added a 4th small saucer for cake because, as he announced, weddings surely counted as Thursday, even when they happened on Saturday. Dallas laughed. Estella laughed. The sound filled the house and reached into corners that had been lonely for years. Later, when the dishes were washed and Toby slept with wedding ribbon still clutched in one hand, Estella and Dallas stood on the porch beneath a sky crowded with stars. The prairie lay quiet. The road to Mercy Falls was silver in the moonlight. Somewhere out there was the place where she had arrived, dusty, late, and unwanted. Here was the place where lateness had become mercy. Dallas took her hand again. This time, there was no crowd to prove anything to, no enemy to answer, no shame to stand against, only warmth from the house behind them, night wind over the grass, and 2 wounded hearts learning the steady language of home. Estella leaned her head against his shoulder. Dallas kissed her hair and whispered, "Right on time," and she believed him.